Welcome back to Two Hearts, where stories are weaved to explore the beauty of diverse cultures and the depths of human connection. Having blossomed over a whirlwind of business and pleasure, Francisco's and Mona's love story remains etched in their memories. Despite the changes they face, the pair is determined to build a life together, but that determination is tested when legal woes and interferences from the past are revealed. Reconnect with Mona and Francisco as they navigate their long-distance relationship, wade through the fallout of misunderstanding, and experience the intensity of love, longing, and desire. Please enjoy the final installment of Bridges Over the Tagus. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so that more members of our community continue to find content like this.
With her heart in tumult and her nerves a messy bundle of unprocessed emotions, it had taken quite some time for Mona to fully relax into her seat on the plane. Once settled, she hazarded a glimpse out of the plane window to find the city of Lisbon fading into the distance below. Immediately, the tears in her eyes betrayed her stoic posture. The past few months of business and pleasure had been a whirlwind of love, laughter, and collective dreams. Every moment that she'd shared with Francisco was etched into her memory, a tapestry of joy and longing. Francisco, standing at the airport, watched as the plane took off, his heart heavy with the weight of their goodbye. He knew that Mona had to return to her life in Charlotte, to her job and her family, but the thought of being without her was almost unbearable. He had fallen deeply in love with her, and the idea of their separation, even if temporary, filled him with a profound sense of loss. Mona Renfro was a proud product of STEM, and as such, enjoyed the professional work she did for a living. As a statistician, her keen eye and analytical mind was vital in helping companies collect, track, and interpret consumer trends to make responsible and sustainable business decisions. Her expertise allowed her the flexibility to work just about anywhere in the world, which had created the opportunity for she and Francisco to cross paths. Francisco Alves, a former history professor, had pivoted his wealth of knowledge and affable disposition into a successful tourism business that had been integral in bringing the couple together. In the days that followed her departure, Francisco threw himself into his work, using the familiar routines of his job to distract from the ache in his heart. He guided tourists through the streets, coastal waterways, and countrysides of Lisbon, always with a polite smile, but his eyes lacking their usual sparkle. The charm and vibrancy of the city he loved most in the world now felt like a reformatory without Mona by his side. Mona, on the other hand, found herself struggling to adapt to her old life. The bustling streets of Charlotte, once familiar and comforting, now felt alien and sterile. She missed the cobblestone paths of Lisbon, the sound of the Tagus River, and the warmth of Francisco's embrace. Every night as she lay in her bed, she would reach for her necklace, tracing the bridge pendant with her fingers, a silent tribute to the love they shared. Their communication became a lifeline, a daily ritual that kept them connected despite the distance. They would talk for hours, sharing their days, their dreams, and their fears. Francisco would remind her of the beauty of a Lisbon sunset, and Mona would close her eyes, imagining herself with her head propped naturally against his shoulder, their fingers entwined. She would tell him about her work, her struggles, and her triumphs, and he would listen, his voice a soothing balm to her homesickness. Despite the distance, as the months passed, their love only grew stronger, nurtured by the depth of their connection. Although unsure of what it would look like long-term, they continued to plan for a future together, dreaming of the day when they could be reunited, when the miles between them would finally disappear. One evening, during their nightly call, Francisco explained that a news agency had reached out wanting to do a segment on his transition from academia to entrepreneurship. Mona asked a host of questions, including when the segment would air. He was unsure but thrilled for the publicity. A month later, Mona saw the piece on one of the famous national morning shows in the States. Francisco looked handsome, was charming, and made an incredible impression on the reporter, in-studio host, and viewership. She was so proud of him and was determined to tell him so. Deciding that 6 months had been long enough a separation, Mona secretly made plans to return to Portugal to surprise Francisco. Once there, she would work on the second phase of her secret plan to stay indefinitely. Francisco, unaware of Mona's impending arrival, was overwhelmed by the immediate popularity that had come with the international report on Saudade journeys. He had to hire a social media manager as well as 3 new tour operators just to accommodate the influx of reservations. His old university had even called wanting to create a new interdepartmental position for him that he could structure as he saw fit. All the attention was amazing and encouraging, but at the end of the day, all he wanted was Mona by his side to celebrate with. Mona's arrival in Portugal this time had been seamless and fluid. She navigated the airport like a pro and arrived at her long-stay flat in no time. She was bursting at the seams to contact Francisco, but decided to follow all the way through with a surprise that was sure to make his day. The image of his smiling face was the last thing she saw in her mind's eye as she crashed into a deep, jet-lag-infused sleep. The next day, Francisco showed up to work to tackle yet another hectic workday. He instructed his staff and navigated the schedules, confirmed reservations, and conducted tours like a disciplined drill sergeant. The company's reviews were at an all-time high, and their social media imprint was making waves. He was just starting the last tour of the day when he noticed a familiar face heading toward the bus. "Carla," he uttered in whispered shock.
"Francisco, it is good to see you," his ex-fiancée voiced in response. She smiled genuinely at him, thrilled at what she thought was his reaction of awe at seeing her after such a long time. "Please watch your step," Francisco recovered quickly as he robotically took her hand to help her up the short stairs into the bus. Carla stood there momentarily, as if she wanted to say more, but moved along to her seat as she was gently nudged by a passenger behind her, also ascending the stairs. Throughout the city tour of the historic and lively bottles, Francisco tried his best to ignore Carla and simply treat her like every other sightseeing paying customer. Unfortunately, he couldn't help glimpsing at her any time the bus passed a location where they'd created a core memory, like the time they had gotten stuck on the Santa Hosta lift, or when they'd eaten holiday sweets to their heart's content in Praça do Rocio at the Rocio Christmas market. Unsurprisingly, her eyes were always waiting for his, each time he looked her way. After wrapping up a long day and returning to the Saudade Journeys offices, Francisco graciously chatted and took photos with the lingering horde of appreciative travelers. Once he'd satisfied his duties in hospitality, he tiredly ambled to his office. Avoiding his line of sight, as she also lingered, Carla had waited until the crowds had dispersed before she followed in the direction that Francisco had gone. The chiming of the door sensor alerted him to the fact that someone had entered the office. "My apologies, but we will be closing short." "Hi again, Francisco. I was hoping to catch you before you—" "What do you want, Carla?" he asked her bluntly. "I know it must have been a shock to see me this afternoon," she noted self-importantly as she made her way more fully into the office to stand before him. "Certainly not on my bingo card," Francisco said. "Neither was learning of your new business venture," she smiled. "Carla, look, it has been a long day and I was simply blown away by how incredible the tour was," she sighed, as if he hadn't just inferred that she should get to the point of her visit. "The nostalgia hit me in waves, and it truly made me think about all the time we lost." "We didn't lose time, Carla. You forfeited it," Francisco stated plainly, even as she closed the space between them. "I understand that now," she offered coquettishly. "And what's prompted this sudden comprehension and introspection?" he asked. "The realization that in my haste for professional success, I didn't consider the importance of having someone by my side who balances me and amplifies who I am. Carla confessed, laying her hands gently on his chest. Francisco noticed how even now, Carla's words were a tangle of self-centered reflection and disingenuousness. Her perspective made it crystal clear what her angle was. Are the results of my recent interview and social media popularity the type of amplification you mean? He asked as he grabbed her wrists to remove her hands from his chest. Unfortunately, at just that moment, he looked up in shock to find Mona standing stock still and staring at him through the plate glass window. "Not again," he mumbled as he shuffled around Carla and headed toward the door. "What?" she gasped in shock and confusion as Francisco left her standing there. "Mona! Mona!" he shouted and took off in a full sprint. Mona had been coming down the street, eager to surprise Francisco, but had been delivered a surprise of her own. It had been like déjà vu seeing him through the large front window of his Sao Daddy Journey's lobby. Only this time, Francisco had looked to be in the throes of an intimate conversation with the beautiful brunette. Gutted at the sight, Mona ran before he could see her fall apart in a wave of hysterical tears. Francisco's pursuit of Mona was immediate, but once he'd reached the cobblestone street just outside his front door, she was nowhere to be found. His emotions immediately began running the gamut at seeing his angel and then recognizing the hurt look on her face at witnessing him engage with Carla. Determined to find his woman and make things right, Francisco continued his search up and down the streets, jostling slow-moving walkers and outright bobbing and weaving around people who insisted on being impediments to his progress. After several long moments with nothing to show for his efforts except frustration and pit stains on his crisp white shirt, Francisco ran his hands angrily through his hair as he stared up at the sky. Then, like a gift from God for exhibiting diligence, he saw movement out of the corner of his eye. Daring to look to his right, Francisco saw a flash of orange in his periphery. Remarkably, it was Mona running away, the color of her blouse identifying her. Instead of giving chase this time, he watched, waited, and plotted. That strategy had resulted in an exhausting but fruitful process of elimination. Familiar with the business and shopping districts nearby, Francisco was able to triangulate the general location that was most likely to be Mona's place of residence. Hard work eventually paying off, he had spent the better part of 2 hours knocking on flat and apartment doors all throughout the neighborhood before he finally found Mona's place. "How did you find me?" Mona demanded angrily as she opened her door, thinking that her delivery order had finally arrived. "Our hearts are connected, Mona. We will always find one another," he replied, his accent thick with conviction. "Are you sure, Francisco? Because that's not what things looked like this afternoon," she reminded him with equal parts anger and disappointment. "May I come in?" he asked, refusing to qualify her exasperated words with the response. Mona did not reply, but stubbornly relented by stepping aside to allow him to cross the threshold. Taking advantage of the minuscule olive branch, Francisco wasted no time in explaining what he was certain had been an unbelievably painful exchange for her to witness. "That was Carla Santiago, your ex," Mona breathed deeply with belated realization. What did she want? Me. Or more accurately, the desire to rekindle a relationship with me now that I'm an overnight celebrity whose popularity can amplify her status. Francisco replied bitterly. "Cisco, What was your response to her?" Mona didn't know whether to apologize on behalf of all women for him having to endure even 1 second with the horrible woman, or kick him out for letting the little hobgoblin touch him. "Mona," Francisco sighed before gently gripping her face and kissing her fiercely. "I've missed you. There was no one I would rather be with than you." "That's what you told Carla?" Mona asked after pulling her lips from his. "No,
I told her that I am in a committed relationship with the love of my life and that she should be respectful of that fact, he answered matter-of-factly. Gobsmacked by his somewhat unexpected reply, all the anger and fight instantly left Mona's body. "Do you mean that?" she cried, tears of hope and happiness. Instead of answering, Francisco confirmed his words with another kiss, this one salient and reverential. As the days and weeks went by, both Mona and Francisco fell back into the easy rhythm that first brought them together. However, their long-term happiness was short-lived. One morning, as they were enjoying a leisurely breakfast, there was a knock at the door. Standing on the other side was a stern-looking official from the Portuguese immigration office. "Bom dia," he offered tightly, before handing Mona an envelope. "I'm sorry, what is this? I mean, o que é isto?" Mona asked, both confusion and alarm sounding in her voice. The worry in her tone immediately alerted Francisco, and he stood from the table to make his way to the front door. In clipped Portuguese, the official informed Mona, with Francisco translating, that her D8 visa had been revoked and she was required to leave the country. "Não compreendo. I don't understand. Why?" Mona asked disbelievingly. "Insufficient proof of accommodations provided in your application," the man stated. Mona looked around incredulously. "You are standing in my accommodations," she pointed out. As Francisco took up the mantle to argue on her behalf, Mona could feel her world crumbling around her. She had followed the rules. She was building a life here, a future with Francisco, and now it was all being torn away. Francisco, seeing the devastation on her face, stepped forward. "There must be some mistake," he said, his voice firm and authoritative. "Mona followed all of the appropriate steps to reside in Lisbon legally. She contributes to our local economy and is an integral part of my life and my business. We are planning a future together." The official remained unmoved. "Be that as it may, Mr. Alves, the determination has been made by the Portuguese consulate and must be adhered to. If you believe that the decision has been made in error, you may decide to appeal it. Be advised, however, that there is no guarantee you will receive a resolution before your departure deadline. Unfortunately, as it stands, Ms. Renfro, you are required to leave Portugal in 30 days' time." Offering his card, the official nodded brusquely before leaving the stunned pair standing in the open doorway. "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do?" Mona exclaimed. Francisco, not one to be easily defeated, had an idea. He turned to Mona, his eyes filled with determination. "We'll fight this," he said. "We'll find a way to stay together." Over the next several weeks, they'd work tirelessly, gathering documents, seeking legal counsel, and making urgent phone calls. The two worked overtime, Francisco calling in favors all over town, and Mona using her analytical skills to research various facets of the law for greater clarity and, prayerfully, a loophole. But for as intrepid as they both were, it wasn't long before they came to the realization that they'd exhausted nearly every avenue available to them. The reality of possibly having to separate again was daunting and began to settle over the pair like a thick, choking haze. "I don't know what else to do, Cisco. Even my employer is saying that it will take a few more weeks for them to sort out this immigration nightmare," Mona said one evening as she lay in his arms on his plush and comfortable sofa. Francisco had invited her over to watch movies and to get her mind off things. She'd been too worked up to notice the opening sequence and the Nights in Rodanthe movie title etched across the television screen. But as she settled into his arms, Mona had almost wept at the realization and the thoughtfulness. "You remembered," she whispered, and kissed his lips passionately.
I did, and everything will be all right, Mona, Francisco promised. The next week, with time running out and no closer to a resolution, Francisco decided that an emotional reset was necessary. Encouraging her to get dolled up, he told Mona that a sumptuous dinner and a night out on the town was exactly what they both needed to take their mind off things. With a half-hearted agreement, Mona realized how hard Francisco was working to lift her spirits, so she figured the least she could do was make an attempt at meeting him halfway. Precisely at 8 o'clock, Mona answered the door where Francisco stood looking as dapper as always, his mouth slightly parted in surprise. "What made you wear that?" he asked, looking Mona over luxuriously before tugging her into his arms for a much-needed kiss. Glancing down at her cream jumpsuit, she knew it was a little snugger in the back than it'd been the last time she'd worn it, but was an otherwise normal outfit for a dinner date. Still, Francisco looked at her as if she were covered in semi-precious stones. "I'm glad you like," she teased as she gripped his sport coat lapels and tugged him closer for another toe-curling kiss. "Sin gusto. Yes, I like," he growled and patted her playfully on her bottom before they headed out of the flat. As Francisco and Mona sat in the elegant restaurant, the soft glow of candlelight dancing across their faces, the weight of their situation hung heavy in the air. Francisco, ever the charmer, had managed to coax a few genuine smiles from Mona, but the looming deadline of her impending departure cast a shadow over their evening. After savoring a delicious meal, Francisco leaned back in his chair, his eyes reflecting the warm ambiance of the restaurant. "Mona," he began, his voice steady and serious, "I have something to propose to you." Mona, mid-sip of her wine, choked slightly, her eyes widening in surprise. "Excuse me?" She managed to sputter, setting her glass down with a clink. Francisco reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I propose that we get married. It's a practical solution to your immigration issue. By marrying a Portuguese citizen, you can stay in the country legally." Mona pulled her hand away, a mix of shock and hurt flashing across her face. "Francisco, are you serious? This isn't some business deal. This is our lives." He nodded, his expression unyielding. "I understand, Mona, but think about it. It's a straightforward solution. You stay in Portugal, and we can continue building our future together." Mona's mind raced, trying to process the sudden turn of events. "Is that the only benefit?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Francisco leaned forward, his eyes locked onto hers. "No, you would also gain EU citizenship rights. It's a win-win situation." Mona felt a pang of disappointment. The romantic in her had hoped for a more heartfelt proposal, not a business transaction. I need to think about this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. As they left the restaurant, Francisco took Mona's hand, leading her through the bustling streets of Lisbon. They walked in silence until they reached the familiar enclosure leading to their hidden garden, the secret oasis nestled in the heart of the city. Stepping into the lush space, Mona released Francisco's hand and gasped in awe. The beautiful space had been transformed, adorned with twinkling fairy lights that cast a magical glow over the olive trees and the gently bubbling fountain. At the far end of the garden, a beautifully decorated arch stood, and beside it, a slightly balding man in a black suit and tie waited patiently. Francisco turned to Mona, a playful smirk on his face. "Perhaps the language barrier confused my words earlier," he said, his voice laced with warmth and affection. Before Mona could respond, Francisco dropped to one knee, his eyes never leaving hers. The small box he withdrew from his breast pocket held an unexpectedly brilliant solitaire. "Mona Renfro, I love you more than words can express. You are my partner, my confidant, and the love of my life." Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Mona's heart swelled with emotion, tears welling up in her eyes. Francisco, this is incredible, she whispered, her voice choked with happiness. As Francisco spoke of his love and his desire to have her as his wife, his staff members slowly emerged from the shadows, their faces beaming with joy and support. Mona looked around, her heart filled with a profound sense of belonging. "But Francisco," she said, her voice trembling, "we can't get married without our families." Francisco stood, taking her hands in his. "This service is for us, my love. We will have a formal ceremony with our families later. But tonight, it's just you and me promising to love and cherish each other forever." He looked into her eyes, his own shining with unshed tears. "Mona, say you'll marry me, that you will call Portugal home, and let my heart be your casa forever." Mona took a deep breath, her heart overflowing with love and longing. "Yes, Francisco. Yes, I will marry you, but only if you tell me what saudade means." Francisco smiled, his voice soft and filled with emotion. Saudade is a deep, melancholic longing or nostalgia. It is a complex, bittersweet emotion that doesn't have a direct English translation. It is like missing someone so deeply that it aches, or having a yearning for something that once was. Mona's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Oh my goodness, that is beautiful." "That is exactly how I feel when you are not near me," he confessed. Pulling her into a tender embrace, Francisco's lips found Mona's in a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and adventure. As they stood there, they were surrounded by the enchantment of the garden and the warmth of their shared dreams. Wasting no time, after filing all the applicable matrimony and citizenship paperwork, Francisco whisked his bride away on the perfect week-long honeymoon. The 7-day Douro cruise package was a combination of land, rail, and sea adventure, all tied up in a luxurious bow for the newlyweds. Beginning their adventure by traveling north to Porto, Francisco and Mona boarded the iconic presidential train, a luxurious and historic marvel, often compared to the Orient Express. Their roomette was beautiful, but a little too tight and cozy for the kind of attention the pair seemed solitarily interested in paying one another. Which was just as well, because the first leg of their trip wound them through the heart of the stunning region of the Douro Valley, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, renowned for its terraced vineyards and breathtaking landscapes. By day, they stopped to visit local family-owned vineyards and estates, learned the history of wine production, and enjoyed an exclusive wine tasting session. And by night, they dined from the exclusive menu of the train's Michelin star chefs and danced to the live jazzy music played in the lounge car. Their overnight stay in Beso da Jegua afforded them the opportunity to stretch their limbs, take a moonlight stroll along the quaint sidewalks of the charming city, and make love until they drifted sedately asleep in each other's arms. After their taste buds had been blessed with delectable treats, exotic fruits, and strong espresso for breakfast, they were whisked away to the riverfront, where their cruise began along the Douro River. "What?" Francisco asked with a soft chuckle, loosening his hold on her only slightly after noticing Mona staring contentedly up at him. "This is a dream come true, Cisco. The perfect man, the perfect country, the perfect life. I am so blessed," she sighed. "Meu amour, if you don't stop looking at me that way, you are going to end up so pregnant," Francisco warned. "I'd like a little more time with my husband first, but I look forward to starting a family with you one day," Mona replied honestly. "As you wish, Señora Alves." He grunted and she squealed with delight as he lifted her in his arms and turned from the observation deck, making a beeline for their cabin. The journey that Francisco and Mona had embarked upon had been one of love, resilience, and the unbreakable bond that had bridged their lives together.
With the weight of an uncertain future behind them, they looked forward to a lifetime of love and adventures, forever bound by the beautiful and profound sentiment of saudade.